Welcome back to the Infinite Rabbit Hole Podcast. I'm your host.
Stop it. Stop.
What is that?
That's crazy.
What is that? What's that coming from?
Echo.
Yeah, but whose mic is that coming from? Hello?
I don't
Hello?
know.
Oh, it's gone.
There you go.
All right.
Cool.
Ready?
Yep.
All right, now I'll do it. Welcome back to the Infinite Rabbit Hole Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy, and I'm not echoing anymore, which is good. Hollower 2, gentlemen. Jake, Jeffrey, you guys ready to roll?
So ready.
All right.
Yeah, that was awesome, dude. That was
dumb.
prime professionalism. I love it. Excellent.
We got some kinks to hammer out, man. We'll be all right. We'll get through this. All right, so we're live again. I don't think there's anybody here. If you're here, sound off in the chat. I don't have a count or a roster to look at, so yeah. Kind of just we're gonna believe that the entire world is watching, and you know they're probably not.
No, they are.
Nope, probably not.
They are just, but not live.
They are at some point.
Yeah.
Anyways, Jacob.
Yes, sir.
How was your day, man? Doing all right?
Yeah, it was good. I've been trying to break down these big old trees we had cut down and stack them into firewood and stuff. And so I was just burning down all the smaller sticks and stuff, blowing smoke into my entire neighborhood all day long. But yeah, it's not bad. Took a nap for a couple hours. Just I guess a chore Sunday, and getting Jeff's area ready to go for next week for him to show up. We got new bath towels. Man, looking up.
Damn.
Yeah.
His butt is gonna be the first one to get rubbed by your new bath towels.
That's right.
Except for all the people at Walmart.
Well, but here's the kicker is that I'm gonna then take those bath towels and I'm gonna sell them on eBay and be like, Shadow Band Podcasts, Jeff Fernandez rubbed his butthole all over these, and they're gonna get bought.
They won't make you as much money as the bath water, but
oh, we're collecting that in the system underneath too. So yeah,
rough.
They'll be able to bathe in your essence.
Like, I need you to shower in this other shower that doesn't really look like a shower.
Yeah. It's just a bucket at the bottom. Like, yeah.
Don't worry about
it. Jeff, this week, man. What? Just 4 days, right?
Yeah,
You'll be here.
I'll be there in a few days, man. Flying out there in a few days.
I know everyone's listening to this, and UFO days is well over, but as we're recording, Jeffrey will be here in just a few more days. Get to meet our buddy from podcasting that we've never met in real life.
Mm-hmm.
But yet we give him passwords to everything that we have. It's great.
Yeah, I could actually be in a facility in the Pentagon or in a dump somewhere.
They don't care about us. We're not Shadow Band. They don't care.
I don't know. You don't know. Yeah. We don't know.
Yeah. You don't. Nobody does. So, I mean, not too much to talk about before we get going. Last week, obviously, we talked about the introduction to the concept of Hollow Earth, went over Symes and Haley and all of their concepts, and a few other pieces of literature on the concept of Hollow Earth. Went into a couple different models, including the concentric spheres and then the hollow Earth, which is the example that we used last week would be kind of like Godzilla, right? So Godzilla versus Kong, the conceptual Hollow Earth where whatever's in there is living on a convex shell instead of a concave shell. I mean, if anybody's seen the movie Kong vs. Godzilla, you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. Honestly, I want to say it's something that's common in a lot of Hollow Earth media, even though there's not a ton of it out there. I want to say it's pretty much the going trend when it comes to Hollow Earth stuff. Anyways, today we're going to be diving into legends, lore, and belief. You guys got anything to put out before we jump in?
Nope.
I'll try to be more or less black pilled this episode, although I don't know how far that trying is going to go. What's interesting? I was listening to a podcast today it was a Joe Rogan podcast with Forrest Galante. It was episode 1408, I think. And Forrest Galante is a biologist, and he's really big into trying to find cryptids and things like that, right? But anyway, he was talking about, it was like a side conversation. They were talking about a cave system that's the biggest cave system in the world that was found between Vietnam and Laos. And it's like the main cavern is like 6 miles across or something like that. The place is so big, it has its own weather inside of it, has its own ecosystem, its own lakes and things, and various types of animals. And it blew my mind. It really did. And I was like, man, there might be something to this whole hollow earth thing as far as if it exists, that there's no reason why it wouldn't have its own ecosystems and things like that, and maybe megafauna that live inside of it and whatnot. I was just like, I was looking at the pictures, and it was just absolutely phenomenal and just stunning. But it was really cool, and it kind of right when I was looking at that, because they have, obviously Joe Rogan has the video podcast and stuff, and so if you're just listening to it, you're gonna miss out on all the clips and pictures that his buddy Jamie pulls up. But I was watching this and I was just like, oh snap, that's crazy. So I don't know, Now that remains to be whether or not the hollow earth exists, but certainly if, and I'm sure we're going to get into it in this episode, but the legends of the lore, people around the world, it would make sense for someone, a tribe or an individual to discover something like that and be like, oh yeah, this is the entrance to such and such realm or whatever it is.
Yeah, for sure, man. Yeah, the only thing I would say, I guess, is just that, I hear people even here in like near NASA, right? That big assembly building, people claim, I don't know if it's a fact or not, but people have claimed that that building is so big that it even condensates and like precipitates in that building, right? Clouds
Sure.
form at the top of that building because it's so big and it's so open, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's not that big compared to like what some of these cave systems are that we know about, right? So, yeah, the whole thing is just totally plausible for me at this point. So,
cave systems so big that you can literally base jump in them and parachute down to the bottom. Yeah,
right, for sure. So, no, I like the lore stuff too. So I'm excited to kind of hear like some of the stuff that Jeremy dug up and see what you guys want to say about it. But
definitely.
Right on. Well, I have a small introduction. Seeing how we didn't do the intro at first last week, we're gonna go ahead and bat 1,000 on this one and do the intro now. You guys ready?
Ready to go.
Alrighty. The idea of a hollow earth trends back to ancient times, where many of the beliefs surrounding the subject stood as answers to life's greatest questions, such as the time prior to one's life, or the exact opposite in the afterlife. Ancient Greeks had details of hidden tunnels and caverns just under the Earth's surface, which stood as entrances to the underworld in their mythologies. Celtic myths described their own versions of one of these tunnels that they called Croashan, or Ireland's Gate to Hell, that housed strange creatures who would at times find their way to the surface of the Earth. Stories, legends, lore, and mythologies from literally every corner of the world have contributed their own beliefs in the world below our feet. But the details of the underworld don't just come from ancient times, but rather from all of human written history. As mentioned in part 1, the 1600s brought us Sir Edmund Halley and his and his contribution to the idea of concentric shells underground where civilizations and various flora and fauna lived out their lives. The 1800s brought us John Cleves Symes, who was the first to provide a description and a name for these gigantic theoretical holes at the most northern and southern points of our planet. Then, in the mid 1900s, Admiral Byrd traveled by plane into unknown tropical territories in the most southern tip of the Antarctic, where he told stories of prehistoric animals roaming, ancient high-tech cities, and an unknown race of beings who inhabit them. More on that in the next episode of Infinite Rabbit Hole. But today, we'll stick to the ancient details of the incredible subject as as well as learn about a cult that based its entire belief on the fact that we do not live on the surface of the earth, but rather inside of it, before diving headfirst into one of the most incredible stories of all time in the famed Shaver mystery and Richard Sharp Shaver's story of a subterranean world that he has visited multiple times called Lemuria. All of this and more as we dive into the topic of the Hollow Earth Part 2, Legends, Lore, and Beliefs. Welcome back to Infinite Rabbit Hole.
I feel so welcomed.
Oh, good. So,
Yeah.
Jeff, you're probably going to be pretty familiar with the name Lemuria.
Lemuria, yeah.
You probably know the different concept of it.
Yeah, Lemuria. I mean, why don't you break down for me what you got first, and I'll tell you what's different from what I understand about Lemuria.
Well, we'll talk about it when we get to that. That's
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I break it down pretty well. It's all part of the Shaver mystery. The Shaver mystery.
What?
Shaver mystery. Richard Sharp Shaver, absolutely wild story that we'll dive into later on tonight. But before we do that, we're going to dive into some more legend stuff, as described in the intro, and we'll kind of make our way across those topics chronologically as they were mentioned in the intro. You guys ready to roll?
Yeah, go for it, dude.
Legends. The Scandinavians tell of a legend of a land of paradise to the north that they refer to as Ultima Thule. This is modernly believed to have been Greenland, but many disagree, and even the name Ultima Thule simply means, quote, a distant unknown region, the extreme limit of travel and discovery, as contextualized by Britannica.com. But legends of a vast world under the crust of the earth doesn't end with the Scandinavians. In fact, many civilizations throughout history tell of an underworld. Some of these inner realms were described as a place of death and torture, where others were described as a place of paradise. The Sumerians told of Kigal. The Egyptians called their underworld Dua. It was known as Hades in Greece and Rome. Buddhism was the primary origin of the concept of Agartha. Indian mythology had Naraka. In Japan, it is Jikoku. German civilizations had its Helheim. Incas, Aztecs, and Mayans all had Ucapac, Mictlan, and Mitnal, respectively, and the Christians believe in hell. Many of these legends were taken very seriously for a very long time. As so, in 1569, a German cartographer by the name of Gerardus Mercator would create a large map that rendered the spherical Earth into a flat surface with a grid-like pattern, so as to be easier for navigational uses for those at sea. The second most influential map that he created was of a quote-unquote from space view of the Arctic. In this now defunct map, he clearly inserted a large sea in the center of the icy mass, which was said to be influenced by the Greek mythological place of Hyperborea. At the center of this ice-locked sea, he placed a large black rock, which he called the Black Precipice. According to author David Standish's book, Hollow Earth, Mercator described this rock as, quote, the lodestone mountain toward which all compasses presumably point. This was built upon later to include that this black precipice formed a donut-shaped of sorts that included a large sea in the inner circle. This was thought to be a representation of the northern Symes hole. All right. So that was a very brief overview of some of the legends or lore surrounding the Hollow Earth from many cultures.
So I don't know if you get into it later or not, but that's kind of interesting because there's all that lore about the mountain at the North Pole, the magnetic mountain at the North Pole. You get into that later?
No, we don't.
No, I don't know like if it's like a civilization's lore or mythology, or if it's just like a more modern flat earth or hollow earth thing, right? But there is a lot of talk in the industry, right, as they say,
Mm-hmm.
About like this magnetic mountain at the North Pole, right? And I've heard it in flat earth circles, I've heard it in hollow earth circles, I've heard it in globe earth circles, like that there's something at the North Pole, something magnetic that's either causing the magnetic sphere or whatever the case is. Like there's 1,000 theories, but so what you were talking about with this what was it, like this
The Black
chunk?
Precipice?
Yeah, the black precipice. Black precipice.
I know, right? Doesn't that sound evil?
Which is also interesting too, because when you get into the like Saturn death cult, the people who run the world, what they believe, they're worshiping this black cube and this black stone, or this black rock, right? Like the company. So that's interesting too.
Yeah, that is interesting,
They're
actually.
worshiping a magnet.
It's not the magnet, I mean, maybe it's a magnet. Who knows?
It's friggin'... Yeah, I don't know, man. There's a lot to unpack when it comes to that Black Precipice, and that the entire map that this guy made. Obviously, we still use a form of this map, right? The flat map of round Earth, which deforms land masses and makes certain things look bigger than other land masses, which aren't true. But the fact that he included something such as the Black Precipice, and then you have, just to go down the conspiracy rabbit hole here for a minute, you have the company of BlackRock, and then you have other significant black rocks in, let's say, like religion, right? There's some religions around the world that find
Like Mecca.
Yeah.
Like the little thing that I forget, the little hat with the little thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you could. There's a lot, really. You could get into it. I could go deep on that, right? You could fold a cross up into a cube, right? You could kind of attach a lot of symbolism to this, but then people have always made the argument too, like it's all just geometry, right? You can kind of do that with anything. You just make things fit.
Jake, do you have anything?
No.
Okay. All right. Next, I get into some fiction. You guys ready?
Yep.
Very brief.
Oh, now it's fiction.
Fiction. Although there were many books authored to try to convince the public or simply go over the history of the idea of the Hollow Earth, there were also a large number of fictional books that were created for entertainment purposes. The first of which was a book titled Relation d'un voyage au pôle, Arctique à pôle Antarctique, by an unknown French author in 1721. Another French novel by the name of Lamachus aux voyages extraordinaires d'un Égyptien dans la terre intérieure in 1734. Baron Ludwig Holberg's novel Journey of Niels Klim to the World Underground was published in 1741. In this book, the protagonist explores the inner planet of Nazar, where the civilizations are described as having different habits and morals to those on the surface. In 1751, Robert Paltock's The Life and Adventures of Peter Wilkins was published, and is easily one of the oddest works on the concepts of the Hollow Earth. In this book, the protagonist takes off for the Antarctic and marries a winged humanoid of the inner Earth, where they have multiple children. But according to David Standish, the oddest of the earlier works was a book titled Ecosameron, by Giacomo Casanova in 1788. Not to give away the story, but as a brief description, the story surrounds a race of inner Earth hermaphroditic dwarves whose civilization is segregated by their various colors of skin, with red being on top of the hierarchy, who feed off of each other's breasts for their nourishments, all while being nudists. The previously mentioned Simsonia was published in 1820 and was the first American Hollow Earth novel, with the most famous work being that of Jules Verne's Journey to the Center of the Earth in 1864. I have also come across 59 other fictional books that describe adventures to an inner Earth world, 8 comics, 25 films since 1935, 15 TV series, and numerous tabletop and video games. I think it's safe to say that Edmund Halley and John Clean Symes really started something big. Now, all right, guys, what do you guys think about the hermetic dwarves that suck off each other's nipples for nourishment?
Giacomo Casanova was writing Hollow Earth fetish fandom. That is so weird.
I think it's interesting that these same stories, right? Like the same stuff that we talk about now has always been talked about, and you could pretty much talk about any topic, really. Like the same stuff that we talk about now, our ancestors talked about hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago, all over the world. And that alone is just interesting. We could talk 2 hours about that. We could just say fuck Hollow Earth and just talk about the mind-boggleness of that.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what I really hate about this part? Or the thing I hate the most about doing a podcast, period, is pronunciation.
You can say screw it and just do it however you want.
I could, but man, I really try to do it right. Like I'll even type into Google, pronounce this, and I'll listen to it, and I'll make my little notes on my write up and try to match that as best as possible. But there's just some things I just can't do. It just come out stuttering like a fool.
You just got to learn every language.
That's right. That's right.
Easy.
It's a skill issue.
Off my lazy ass.
Yeah, it's a skill issue.
I get it.
Take that limitless pill and just start learning all the languages.
Gosh, man. I wish I didn't have to sleep. I feel like it was an epic waste of time.
Yeah.
Sleeping.
It's
off topic here.
When you were talking about like the naked dwarves in the Hollow Earth thing, for whatever reason, the first thing that came to mind was like Middle Earth. And I've always had like this thought in my mind when I'm watching Lord of the Rings, like, what if this isn't just some sci-fi? What if this is like history? This is like prehistory history.
This stuff is lost on Jeremy. He's never seen Lord of the Rings.
I have never seen Lord of the Rings. That's true.
But I agree,
Jeff. Surprise me.
I've also thought the same thing, and I thought, wow, that's ridiculous.
Of course it's ridiculous. Unless it's not ridiculous, right?
Unless it's not, yeah.
Unless they know, right? And like they're just putting out movies like, hey,
what if we're all in Narnia right now?
Yeah.
This is what Narnia is after the first humans showed up through the wardrobe.
You ever seen
Narnia
that,
sucks.
Jeremy?
No.
Wow.
Yeah.
You ever read it?
Nope.
Wow.
Nope.
Dang, dude.
This guy.
One of the worst people on this planet.
We're going to have to Clockwork Orange him and make him watch all the movies.
Yeah.
Just eyes peeled open.
Please don't waste my time.
Sitting in the chair, making him watch Lord of the Rings straight through.
Yep.
No. I'll fall asleep with my eyes open. All right. This next section is on Cyrus Teed and the Cult of Koresh. This is pretty interesting stuff. And sometime down the road, we'll dive back into the Cult of Koresh because they have a lot of really interesting details about their cult that I do believe that we can have a lot of really good conversations about here on Infinite Rabbit Hole. Because eventually we will dive into the world of cults. I actually just got in a huge book on Bohemian Grove. The thing is like this. It's thick. 2 C's. Thick. Actually.
Dang, boy, that's thick.
Look at that thing.
Look at how thick that thing is.
Look at that thing.
Girthy.
Ooh, girthy. Let me tell you. The girth on this is exactly 437 pages worth of girth.
It's like a 15-minute YouTube video, man.
Yeah, so cults are coming. And I think we're going to start off with Bohemian Grove. Why not, right?
Nice.
Why would we start off with anything else?
That's not a cult, man. That's a
It's
club,
a
dude.
fucking cult.
No,
Stop.
dude.
It's absolutely a
How
cult.
dare you? Those people run the world, man. It's just a club. It's like a gentleman's club,
No,
man. That's
it's
all.
a fucking gentleman's cult.
No, that's all it is, dude.
And like any good bootlicker, Jeremy got a tattoo of an owl on his forearm, so he can be part of the club too.
I did. Look, they
You got a
won't.
Moloch tattoo.
Yeah, he did.
I did. Yeah, because I'm
Mhm.
part of the Bohemian Club.
Yeah. He's over
Just
there like,
kidding,
oh,
I'm
don't kill me and my family. Oh, look, I got an owl tattoo.
Look, I'm a good boy. Like, save this one.
They sent that book to him.
Yeah, this is my study
Like,
guide.
welcome.
All right, you guys ready?
Yeah.
Ready.
All right. The Cult of Koresh. Cyrus Teed was an eclectic physician from the U.S. who, in 1869, claimed to have heard the voice of God coming from his own body during an unconscious experience that many believe was brought upon by electric shock. According to author David Standish, Teed sees himself saying, quote, "Fear not, my son, thou satisfactory offspring of my profoundest yearnings." As he was given hold of his body again, he watched as a brilliant light appeared above his head with 12 diamonds that merged and birthed the human form of a beautiful woman. Shimmering beautiful purple and gold cloth with a winged staff and standing on a silver crescent, the woman announces that she is God and that she herself is the embodiment of the Father, Son, and Mother together. The vision continues for some time, and when he awakens, he is lying on his couch in his laboratory. This may remind many of a drug-induced hallucination, but what is very interesting is that he claimed to have been told by who he referred to as God. He claims to have been told a huge secret of existence, and that light was both matter and energy. Why is this important, you ask? Well, in 1801, a man by the name of Thomas Young began experimenting on light to discover whether light was either made of particles or waves, particles being the representation of matter, and waves being the representation of energy. Yes, the research into this question began in 1801, but it wasn't until 108 years later in 1909 when G.I. Taylor performed the first low-intensity double-slit experiment which unveiled that light behaved as both matter and energy. So, Cyrus Teed had claimed to have been given incredibly important information about physics that was completely unknown at the time about the properties of light. If you would like to learn more about this incredible discovery, listen to part 1 of our coverage on the simulation theory, where we go a little deeper into the history of the double slit experiment. We will also be diving deeper into this topic in an upcoming episode of the Infinite Rabbit Hole. But among other truths unveiled to Teed by his visitor, he also learned 1. That the entire universe is a spherical shell, and that all life in the universe lives upon its concave interior. The Earth, or 2, the Earth being no different than another layer of that shell, with other layers of spherical shells below its crust. 3, with humans living on the inside, concave portion of the crust instead of the convex outside of the crust that the rest of the world believed. 4, God is both male and female and is personal to every individual. 5, matter is destructible, but only deconstructs into energy, and energy can be made up into matter. 6, reincarnation exists. 7, heaven and hell are mental conditions within our minds. 8, we need to get rid of money, power, and wage slavery in order to correspond correctly with the Christian church. 9, the universe is based on equity and not equality. To say two separate people are equal would mean that neither are individuals. 10, and lastly, according to author David Standish in his book Hollow Earth, quote, the Bible is the best written expression of the divine mind, but it is written symbolically. The symbolism must be interpreted by a prophet who would appear in every age and in the context of that age. What we are most interested in today is his first point made. The earth is a hollow sphere, holding other hollow spheres and itself being within another hollow sphere known as the universe. In fact, Teed claimed that there were an additional 17 different layers of spheres within the inner earth. The shell of the earth that we live on, the inside of, was 100 miles thick, and every layer and its own atmosphere with a void above the atmosphere. He was the first to claim that we ourselves were living within the hollow, when he stated that the universe was a shell itself, and within a void above each atmosphere. It would then seem as if each civilization on each ring of the earth would look up at the night and see their own versions of the universe on the concave side of the crust above their void. This model that he had founded was referred to as the cosmogenic egg. Eventually, Cyrus Teed changed his name to Koresh and founded the Koreshan community, which practiced Koreshanity. He amassed a following of 200 at the peak of this commune that would eventually be established in southwestern Florida and be known as Estero. Here is where we would expand upon his belief that we lived on the interior of the planet's shell, and with the help of a Professor Morrow and an invention called a rectilineator, would be built to prove his belief. The purpose of this rectilineator was to measure the curvature of the Earth. The instrument was built using 10 large double T squares made of mahogany. These individual T squares were set on 10 carefully balanced mounts of sorts. The test would take place on a beach in Naples, Florida, and a month would pass before the instrument was calibrated and the entire experiment would be known as the Koreshan Geodetic Survey. The outline of the experiment had them lining up the contraption in a linear formation with each of the 10 sections in front of the other. When ready, the back portion would be removed and brought to the front and recalibrated to sit properly level. This would continue for 4 miles out to sea from their location, and it was predicted by Teed that the contraption would touch water at about 4 miles, which would prove that the Earth curved inward instead of the believed outward. 5 months and 4 miles later, the rectilineator touched water, and Teed had announced victory on May 5th, 1897. Of course, this is not telling there is no telling if his experiment was run correctly. Mainstream science sure didn't think so, as we are still taught that we live on the outside shell of the Earth. All in all, there is a lot more to the story of Teed and the Koreshans, but since it doesn't have anything to do with the concept of hollow Earth, we will have to save that for another day. All right, Jake. I know you probably have a lot to say here.
No, not really. Cults have come and gone for a really long time. All types of people say that they've had God experiences, or they were talked to by an angel and told that, oh, what people are believing isn't the whole truth. We call that Gnosticism, where there's hidden knowledge, which was a huge problem even back in the early Christian church. You know, there was churches that were springing up all over Greece and Rome, and with eyewitness testimony, people that actually seen Jesus, and they're following along. But then there were people that were trying to profit off of that, saying, "Oh, well, yeah, but that's not all of the information. You should give us money, and we'll give you the rest of the information." And so this Gnostic belief has existed for an incredibly long time, since the very start, and it still is. I mean, you still have cults and sects of Christianity, or they call themselves Christians, but in reality, they don't agree to anything that the Bible says about Jesus or God or any of that stuff, and they make their own stuff up. It's like, well, then stop calling yourselves Christians, because you're not, right?
Mhm.
But regardless, now I'm under the belief of demonic forces and angelic forces, and just like in Genesis, the very first book of the Bible, it talks about the Nephilim, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men and found them beautiful and laid with them and created a race of giants. And it goes in further to say that these giants and these spirits were giving knowledge to humans, right? So sure, like he could see this demonic figure that could try to wreck his idea of God and completely change, his perception of things and give him a little bit of truth, because this demon has been here since the beginning, because, God created the angels and then he created everything else. And then everything else is just nonsense. But that little bit of truth that we have is what has us talking about him 200 years later. If it wasn't for that, no one would ever talk about this guy ever again, because they'd be like, well, it was all nonsense. It's just another guy talking nonsense, but we have a little bit of fact. So now his ideas about who God is and that, it's a mother figure and all sorts of stuff. Now, let's be real. God is a spiritual being, which means he doesn't have a sex. If he identifies himself as a he in the Torah and stuff like that, then sure, I'll call him a he. But in reality, this isn't a man with male genitalia. This is a spiritual being. So God doesn't have a sex, right? Doesn't have a gender. But anyway, so you get a little bit of that truth, and then you get into, that is then discovered, and then, now we're still talking about him because one thing he said actually came to fruition, or it was discovered that it had been all the time, right? But it was discovered. But it really just seals it for me when the Gnostic beliefs come out. And then the next thing is that, well, I'm going to start a cult. I'm going to change my name, and then I'm going to have all my Koreshians, my Koreshian followers or whatever, right? And stuff like that. And it's just, it's amusing. It's like instead of debating and then being like, oh, turns out we were all wrong, it's like, well, we're just going to start a cult because I'll get the feeble-minded to believe my nonsense, and then everyone else is just like, yeah, those guys are crazy, But that's the way I see it anyway. But yeah, it's I don't understand the experiment that he did. I would have to see an image of it, or someone demonstrate it or whatever, because I just don't. I can't see it in my mind what you're really talking about. The T-squares made out of mahogany and then everything. I get it. Like, they took the back layer and they shifted it forward, and they shifted it forward, kind of like some of the runs we would do when we were in boot camp or whatever, where the
exactly
people
the same
sprint to the
concept.
front, they get in the front, and then it just rotates like that for however many miles you're going to be running. I mean, that makes sense, but I don't understand how that would then show that the Earth curved upward versus curving downward.
So I can answer that really quickly, right?
Sure,
So
go for it.
let's say that they made it perfectly level on the beach, like they set it up about a foot over water level at high tide or whatnot.
Sure.
Right at its highest tide, and then they made it perfectly level. They took the back piece, moved it to the front, then made that perfectly level. Right, so that you're continuing that line straight out. And the idea is that if you continue that straight line all the way out, and if the Earth is concave, like we believe, eventually the gap between the top of the water and the tool would become greater. But if it was convex, right, so the Earth would curve upwards, eventually that tool would hit water, and that would prove that it's curving upwards. Now, there's a lot of holes and issues with this tool, because if you got to think of the ways that you can calibrate this, right? There's a couple different ways that you can calibrate it. One would be to use a level, right?
Right.
And no matter where you are on Earth, if it is a sphere, I'm going off the concept that it's a sphere. A level with a bubble gauge always can show level no matter what. So if he were to run off of the calibration tool being a bubble gauge or something along the sorts, it would curve with the Earth no matter which way it curved, inwards or outwards. That it would only show level to match the planet itself. So I I don't really like the exercise that they did or the experiment. I think there's a lot of holes in it. Um, I could picture what they were doing. I just don't think it proves anything because I don't
What
know
about
if
tides
they're.
and stuff? And
Well, that's
suddenly the
that's
tide
another
rushes
thing.
in, the water comes all the way up, and they're like, oh,
Oh
turns
yeah,
out
that's it.
it's not even a gradual curve. I mean, it's like this. Like,
Yeah, right.
yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. We'd have to dive deeper into the cult itself and see if there was more information on how they calibrated it and what they did about tides and everything. Because I don't know that answer, and the sources that I had didn't tell it. So it's tough to say. I doubt that the experiment was run correctly.
When was
Um,
this?
this was just prior to 1900, I believe,
So
1897.
there's been a lot of people like recently who have been doing curvature experiments trying to prove flat Earth or not, or disprove flat Earth, right? And they're using like lasers and shit like this.
That would be the best way to do it.
Right.
But that's with current technology.
Right. And that's why I was asking when this is, right? Because people were like coming up with wild theories about shit, 100, 200 years ago. Right.
Mhm.
So a lot of that I kind of just take with a grain of salt, unless it's obviously like every culture has the same thought, right? Then I'm thinking about it differently. But when it's just like some guy like, oh yeah, and we'll do this weird experiment, like shut the fuck up, dude.
Well, plus it's like I don't know what sort of architecture there was at that time frame where they were doing that in the 1800s in Naples, Florida. But I mean, you could just pick a big building and just go far enough back to see, whether at 10 miles away, whether you could see a little bit of the building is like not is below the level of what you can see, or if you can see the base of it and the ground too,
You can't really rely on that. People have done this, right? And people have gotten tripped up, and there is something to like light refraction and these things.
What
People
kind of did
have
the mirage effect too.
right, people have spotted skylines that they shouldn't be able to spot, right? Now, I'm not a mathematician. I don't know how to do the math or like solve the equation that shows you like the curvature of the earth, right? I can't look at that and tell you what the solution is. I have to rely on a man in a robe to tell me the answer to that. However, people have like in telescopes and things like that looked out on the horizon on a clear day and seen something that should be X miles below the horizon as it curves away. And
The
now,
Chicago skyline.
right, and people have said, hey, look, there's refraction, there's light, this mirage, there's a lot of reasons why that could be the case. Like we've talked about before, like, is gravity affecting light? Like, there's a lot of questions.
Right.
So, you can't just rely on that kind of experiment. It would have to be like a laser, but then again, even that could be something. What I think is the most interesting though is just the concept of like layers of not just the earth, but like the universe, right? Like everything in each layer is the universe for the inhabitants within. Now, when I think about people in 1800 something or whatever year back in the day thinking about this type of concept, I think that, again, okay, going back to what I said, let me take a step back. Remember I said earlier, we're always talking about and thinking about the same topics that humans have thought about and talked about, right?
Right.
I think one of them is the idea that we're starting to understand using like theoretical physics, where like the universe is folded in on itself an infinite number of times. And every time you go into these folds, it's the universe repeating itself, these multiverses or these string theory universes or these quantum universes. There's all these different things, right? So I think that even 100, 200 years ago, people were thinking about this idea because I think it's a universal truth, right? Like people just, these thoughts come to us. Back then, their way of explaining it was the earth with these like Russian doll situation where it's just every ring inside is the universe for the one before. I just don't think they had the idea or the language to explain the idea of like this, folding of reality in on it itself that we're kind of discovering now. I think that's what they were trying to convey.
See, this is why I've heard people say, especially in like those Navy conversations that are just never ending. We're bored out of our minds. Like, who could win in a fight, a grizzly bear or a gorilla? But there was a question was, do you think that people 200 years ago, or say 1,000 years ago, or if you believe how old some people say the Earth is, 10,000 years ago, right? That those people were stupid, or that they just lacked the technology. And this is where I say that they were just as smart as they are today. Of course, there were some people that were a lot smarter. That's why we have scientific innovation and things like that. But they were just as smart as today, but they lacked the resources to figure out the stuff, right? And so because of today, what we have, and we have the people that are smart enough, like you got Elon Musk, that he's on the Joe Rogan podcast saying that there's no way we could ever have a car that solar powers itself, because we like 1 kilowatt per, whatever he said, as far as our solar panels go, is like the best that it's ever going to get. There's just no going past that, right? So we have those people that have figured it out to the extent where it could not get any better in that degree for that specific thing. But back in the day, I think that the people were just as smart, had the exact same questions. They didn't have the technology, they didn't have the infrastructure, the know-how to figure out, all right, well, what's the answer then? Right?
Yeah, I mean, even like modern science claims that we've been anatomically the same for like 250,000 years, right? Like nothing has changed basically. Our brains have been the same size. We've been functioning the same way as a biological entity for 250,000 years at least, right? So I think you're absolutely right. I think, and it's the truth, right? Think of who the smartest person you could think of right now, right? I don't know, Stephen Hawking, Neil deGrasse Tyson, Elon, whatever it is, right?
Right.
Their smartness, they're only able to execute on that intelligence based off, like you said, previous discoveries and inventions, right? Like Elon Musk wouldn't be able to build rockets if Werner von Braun didn't, do rocket science, and before him, whoever. So, but that doesn't mean that 200 or 2,000 years ago, people weren't smarter than some of the smartest people you could think of today.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And maybe there was people going in different directions, right? We're all stuck in the last 150 years, we've been stuck in this like physical, like mechanical, technological discovery thing, right? Where we're discovering everything and like putting words to it and like dialing it in this weird like physical way. But there could have been people in the last 250,000 years who were smart enough to like discover what we know of as quantum physics in another fashion, right? Through music perhaps, or through any other form of interacting with the universe, you know what I mean? Not just nuts and bolts. They could have been like humming and creating sounds and discovering like cymatics and like understanding what that was, you know?
And that's something to be said about like what the Younger Dryas and lost civilizations and pre-flood. Like, how bad was it pre-flood? I can't just assume that it was just because people were sinful, so God wiped us off the face of the earth. But it was, there's talks about there was such an advancement in technology that maybe, I don't know, maybe they did have like genome projects, and they were doing like clones type stuff and making hybrids and whatnot. I mean, who's to say? There's no evidence of that anywhere. Let's say it's buried under a mile of sediment. But
right, like the
but
crust
still,
could have
it's like,
folded in on itself over that period of time and
but it's
completely
like,
destroyed the geological record. It's like, who
oh,
knows?
sure, yeah. But it's like there's something to be said that, I mean, it may be the idea of these, like you said, these thoughts and ideas have been kind of plaguing mankind since the beginning. That could also be because, according to the Bible, at least, there was at least one family that survived the flood through Noah's Ark, right? Noah's wife, his sons, their wives, I believe. And they were in that environment they could have talked about the same stuff, and there you go, rinse and repeat. It goes on to the next generation where we can finally get the technology up to do the exact same things with CRISPR and all that sort of stuff, you know.
Well, I think that kind of also goes back to what Jeremy was saying about, how everything it could be interpreted. God is like individual, right? I do believe that to a certain extent, right? Like what you're talking about with Noah, right? Those stories go back to like Gilgamesh, right?
Yeah.
Way before, but it's the same stories, right? So
Yeah.
has this happened multiple times? Is the story the same with different names and different cultures, or is it different stories that have happened over and over again? Did the Epic of Gilgamesh happen then 10,000 years later? The flood of Noah happened, or is it the same story? Like there's a lot of things there.
Right.
I was thinking while you guys were talking about
How
the
dare you?
the differences between, let's say, scientists from then to now, right? Because these are the thinkers. The thing is that if you look at the earlier scientists, right, they were building, in comparison to what we're building off of, from a level ground, right? They're building
they're
from
going
the
from
ground level.
scratch. Yeah.
Yeah, they're building from, the very elementary ideas or concepts of science and physics and whatnot. And the problem is that we're so far ahead compared to that now because they laid that groundwork down for us. But now we're a few generations above that now. But the problem is that people don't understand what is real. And everything gets clouded due to politics and money and stuff. So you get somebody that comes out and says, oh no, this is the right way. This is how it is. But what is it behind that? Is it actual science, or is it them getting pushed some sort of kickbacks? And the problem is that we have people building scientific facts, bunny air quotes, off of false information. And that's where we get the people like the flat earthers that are like, well, you guys need to understand that we were brought up in a school system that taught this because somebody wanted us to learn it, right? So you have those people that are like, hey, be weary of what you're being taught, because it's very, very easy for people in that position to feed false information for their own benefit. So we need to look at this as if we're building off of the ground level. And the problem with that is that we're building off the ground level again. The way that civilization should work, the best way that civilization will work, is that if we can keep building off of solid, fundamental, and advanced science. But if we keep building off stuff that we don't know is 100% true, we're going to keep going down false paths and bring false information, false science to the forefront. And everything's just going to end up horrible. I just got done reading the book 1984. Jeff, you ever read that?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, what an intense book. And it just reminded me very much to what we're talking about now, right? In that book, they literally will go back and erase history. They'll erase physics. They'll erase all sciences, math, whatever, just because they want to control how the population is thinking. Now, I don't believe that scientists from the past or scientists from the present are any smarter or any dumber than each other. I think it's just what the tools that they have to build from.
Right.
I think a guy like Elon Musk is a very intelligent guy, and he was able to make things happen because he ignored some of the false sciences that were out there and kind of went down his own rebellious path to create things that others are not, which I think is incredible. You know, you have outliers like Elon Musk, and I'm not talking from a fanboy of Elon Musk, because I think he definitely has his issues, but what he does in life is absolutely incredible. Why is there not thousands of Elon Musks running around right now? Well, that's because others are being caught up by science that may not be correct, because at some point somebody wanted to push that as truth because they can get a Nobel Peace Prize or whatever, right? So I
This is what I argue, like, in almost every single episode at some point, right? Like, we just talked about it last week when we were talking about the gravity thing. And I was like, look, maybe it's not gravity, whatever it is. And this is what Terrence Howard was talking about on Joe Rogan, right? Like, 1+1. What does he say? 1+1 equals
I don't know.
3. I don't know. Whatever the fuck his little bullshit is. But, the point is that, like, something along the way isn't on point. And because of that, our science and or math isn't on point. And we're making advancements, but a lot of it is on guesswork, and like stuff works, but it's not working as efficiently as it could be because we're not dialed in somewhere going back. Maybe it's as far back as Newton, maybe it's not that far, who knows, but the problem is, like you said, you had the Rothschilds make the education system in the West, and that became the standard around the world. And if you wanted money, right, if you wanted funding for your scientific research, you had to play by the rules, and you still have to play by the rules in order to get that funding. So that is the biggest problem. I mean, I could go on for days about all of the faulty science. I mean, we could talk about geoengineering as an example, right? Just the fact that they're like, that's not a chemtrail, it's a contrail, is throwing a lot of people off. People who are smart enough to figure out what's happening there, and do the research and do the investigating, and make a change. Some of those people will never actually take the first step because they just think it's contrails, because they're told by somebody in a coat that it's a contrail and not a chemtrail. Chemtrails are fake. But Frank down the street might actually have the ability to do something about it if you thought that chemtrails could be a possibility, right?
Yeah.
So,
well, like in 1984, in one of the scenes, the guy says, "What is 2+2?" Right, to build off of what you were just talking about. What is 2+2? Well, it's 4. No, it's not. It's 5. What? Let me ask you again. What is 2+2? It's 4. No, it's not. It's 5. It's 5 until we need it to be 4, but for now it's 5. Right? And that's the that's what scientists nowadays are building off of.
The Ministry of Truth.
Yes, exactly. It's a plug for that book. That is just an absolutely awesome.
George Orwell was a legend, bro. I think that book came out in 1944, if I'm not mistaken, or 1940. It came out in the 40s.
Yeah, it was way before 84. That's for sure.
That guy was so on point that they use his name. Like, his name has become an adjective in the dictionary, like Orwellian. Yeah. George Orwell wrote these books and had these concepts, and now it's in the dictionary, Orwellian, right? Some people would say we live in an Orwellian state right now, but
I just finished that book today, and I just ordered 3 more of his books just because I got to read more of his stuff. I mean, if anybody listening has not heard or read or listened to 1984, yeah, it can be dry at times, but if you really listen to the story behind the story, it is modern civilization. Like, you're that book is telling you exactly what our future looks like, and it's just incredible. But anyways, we got a little off track there. But you guys ready to roll?
Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna dive into the Shaver epic. Did you guys have anything else to say on that?
Yeah, I did. I looked it up while y'all were chatting. How do you pronounce that? Schweitzer. Paleontologist Mary Schweitzer first discovered evidence of preserved blood cells in a Tyrannosaurus rex fossil around a decade ago. I looked this up. I was like, mummified red blood cells in T-Rex fossils.
Mhm.
To what Jeff was saying, and I mean, Jeremy, I mean, all of us have been saying it just in our own words, but you have this idea that dinosaurs died out or T-Rex died out 67 million years ago, but then when they're transporting a femur for a T-Rex, the helicopter or the ropes attached to the fossil that the helicopter is carrying snaps, the bone falls, hits the ground, cracks open, and they find, mummified or at least preserved red blood cells inside of it. If you want funding as a paleontologist, you can't just up and say, well, that shouldn't happen. This should just be calcium.
Mhm.
I guess dinosaurs didn't die out 67 million years ago. Maybe it was 10,000 years ago or something like that. Whatever that looks like. You can't do that. You have to stay on par with the narrative that this Earth is billions of years old and we evolved and all this mumbo jumbo as far as I'm concerned. But it's like every once in a while you get those outliers where something comes to be completely false. And it's like, if that's true, then how could this possibly be true as well? Right? And
Yeah.
that maybe it's not what we seem, maybe it's not what we thought it was, but with the way that we have our funding and all that stuff set up now, and the way you have to go off the backs of other people's research, it seems almost impossible for anyone, even if they made a radical discovery like that, or, even to the hollow earth, that they'd ever be able to come out and say it and say, hey, turns out that everyone that ever said that the earth wasn't hollow or the earth wasn't flat or whatever was false, because they'd lose their credibility, they'd lose their funding, they wouldn't get
Mhm.
any attaboys, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And so it seems like, just to, I guess, piggyback off of what everyone else is saying, that it really, I don't know, it really makes me feel like even if that was true, even if it was true that the earth was hollow, or it was true that the earth was flat, or it was true that we were in a concave versus a convex world, and there was when we look at the stars, there's actually a shell on top of that at some level of elevation, and then there's another layer,
Yeah.
whatever it was. Even if that was true, we would never be told that.
No.
In the same
No.
way, if a hardcore biologist that wasn't in the cryptozoology community found Bigfoot, we would never get told that they found Bigfoot.
Well, this is why you get flat earthers. This is why you get hollow earthers. This is why you get various flavors of conspiracy theorists, is because we're constantly being fucking lied to about every aspect of our lives. This is why they exist, right? This is exactly why. Is
Yeah.
because somebody out there needs funding for something, or somebody wants to earn that Nobel Peace Prize before they fucking croak.
Yeah.
So everything else can't be true, or if it were to turn out that, and Nobel Peace Prize laureates, their work gets proven to be basically useless sometimes, right? It happens, but if it continuously happens all the time, what does the laureate even look like? It looks like a shit award. So why would they even
Right.
continuously do that unless they can't cover it up? So, I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's a little too far, but the concept of we're constantly being fucking lied to about a lot of things does exist. Like, that's real, and that's why conspiracy theorists and all flavors of exist, is
I
because
don't
people
even
out there ask questions.
I don't even know if it's necessarily being straight up lied to about a lot of it. I think a lot of it is like the idea of planned obsolescence, and even not just with products. You guys know about planned obsolescence, right?
Yes.
Like
No.
where they design stuff to break at a certain point, so you have to buy the next one.
Oh yeah.
So it's the
Cell
same
phones.
thing. Yeah, cell phones, right?
Yeah.
Light bulbs. Light bulbs is a great example because
Right. You
there's
got
like
that
a
one
light
that's
bulb
in
in a
New York
firehouse
that's
that's
been
been burning
for
for
120 years.
100
Yeah.
years. Exactly, right? But they couldn't make money on light bulbs if they never burned out, so they made them only last 2,000 hours or whatever.
Yeah.
So
Right.
anyway, I think the same thing happens with information, especially things like this. Like if the Earth is hollow, like it's not that they're lying to us as much as it's like because they tell us all the time, like we don't know, we haven't discovered everything, we haven't discovered all of the bottom of the oceans yet. We're all still in the age of discovery here, right? So they're not really lying to us as much as they're just telling us like, here's what we know so far. But I think the higher echelons of thems that run the world, right?
Mhm.
They know, and they're just like, we'll just make it 500 years until they get the whole picture and they realize that the Earth is hollow. Because for that time, we can do all these other things to get the money and get the control and get the power and blah, 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 blah. Control evolution or whatever.
Right.
All right. I think I'm ready to
That's
move
all
on
I
from
had.
this. I think I'm ready to move on. You guys ready? You guys ready to hear about the Shaver epic? It's
Let's go.
wild.
Shaver what?
We need to
Epic.
get a Manscaped.
Yeah.
Shaver epic.
This is
episode's
wild.
provided by Manscaped. That'd be awesome.
Where is it? Right here. Nope, not that one. This is probably one of my favorite books that I have in my
Look at how thick it is.
in my collection. It's called The Lost Continents and the Hollow Earth by David Hatcher Childress and Richard Shaver. And it's actually signed by David Hatcher Childress.
Nice.
Jeff, you know who that is, right?
The name sounds familiar, but I don't know.
Oh, come on, man.
I saw a picture of his face. I'd probably recognize him.
Don't fucking do that to me. All right. Anyways, all my research from this came directly from this book. It's basically two books in one. I Remember Lemuria and The Shaver Mystery. This is wild. This is the second to the last section that we'll cover for tonight. So we're moving right along. And you guys ready to jump in? Ready to roll? Good to go? Good to go. The Shaver Epic. The story of Richard Sharp Shaver and his relationship with a subterranean world known to him as Lemuria is one of, if not, the most incredible and detailed stories that anyone has ever told in respect to the topic of the Hollow Earth. Shaver discovered these past memories while welding at a Ford assembly plant in Michigan. Voices would come to him from what he believed to be the underworld while he was at work, and he would go on to publish an entire book on his memories of his past life as a man of sorts by the name of Mu'in Mayan, who lived many thousands of years ago in Mu, a local term used in the entirety of the underworld realm of Lemuria. The book was titled I Remember Lemuria and was published in 1948. But before it was published as a book, it was printed in small doses in a fictional magazine titled Amazing Stories by none other than Ray Palmer. Along with these voices that were apparently beamed into his head by what we would learn later would be referred to as a mind control ray, he was also given visions to enhance the reality of these stories that he would eventually publish in his mind. The story was later removed from being included in the publication as Shaver went on to publicly announce that the stories were not fiction and that everything he said in his telling of events and details were actually true. This caused Palmer, who strongly believed Shaver, to leave Amazing Stories and create the popular publication amongst Fortean fanatics, Fate magazine. His story began by introducing himself as Mu'in Mayan and his explanation of his hometown, if you will, of Sub-Atlan. This Sub-Atlan was named such as it was a city built directly below the surface version, which was referred to as Atlantis. In this world, there were titans, and these titans were considered to be the elders in which knowledge, wisdom, and experience was achieved and distributed by their words. Titans live amongst the typical subhumans, and in the case of enough being present, the city in which they populated would become known as a Titan city. The inner Earth's general geological structure consisted of layers in which the inhabitants would take large elevators or public vehicles that worked off of manipulated gravitational forces to traverse to traverse amongst what Shaver referred to as Center Mu and the subsurface. Early in his epic, he describes how Mutanmayan had decided to visit a metropolis known as Teen City in Center Mu to learn potion science under the recommendation of an artistic mentor of his. Upon his arrival to Teen City, he was surprised to find that his body felt nearly weightless from the lack of gravitational influence in the deep underworld. Lemuria was populated by many races of humans and humanoids from other planets. Through generations of interbreeding, many of these different races would be birthed, and which created the new term veriforms, which was used as an umbrella term in place of terms like breed or race. The amount of veriforms was difficult to pinpoint as hybrids bred with other hybrids, which led to new or sub-veriforms being created regularly. Among these veriforms, Shaver regularly mentioned humanoids with hooves, tails, horns, glittery skin, and many other combinations of attributes shared from both living creatures on Earth and in the realm of our mythologies. Among the already mentioned citizens of the underworld of Lemuria, there were two other races of elders that need to be mentioned, the Deros and Teros. Both names stand as an abbreviation for their own terms. Deros, short for detrimental robots, and Teros for integrated energy robots. The evil Deros stand as the filter that keeps the subsurface a secret from those on the outer world of the planet. They are known to famously weaponize quote-unquote mind control rays, aka the Tailog, in order to kill, manipulate, and progress their views of the world in which they wish to live. During Shaver's recounting of his past life as Mutanmayan, he explains how it is the Deros that were responsible for keeping the citizens of Lemuria from migrating to a safer star system. He specifically mentions an event where he was at a dance with his love interest, Arl, when a Titan was killed by another type of instant death ray weapon. This is also where we learned that this ray was known as the Black Death. The Teros, on the other hand, have the power to use a ray of their own to not only counter the ray of the Deros, but also kill the user of the weapon when it can be determined where the individual is. This is done by pointing their own ray at the Black Death, which allows the Teros ray to follow it like a pathway and kill the user. With that being said, the Teros are the civilization's elders who are tasked with the important job of getting the inhabitants of the subterranean world off of this planet before more harmful quote-unquote seeds from our sun eventually ruin their perfect health and ability to stay alive for hundreds of years. The story continues on for quite a while and is full of many science fiction staples such as space flights, sexy women, mysteries, aliens, UFOs, and of course, a hero. In this case, it would be Shaver himself as Mutanmayan. But is the Shaver mystery really what it was said to be? I'm going to go ahead and jump right into the last part here and just kill it. Ready? Richard Sharp Shaver. Born in Berwick, Pennsylvania in 1907, Richard Sharp Shaver was a troubled boy who was said to have two invisible friends, one in which he referred to as his best friend, and the other as his worst enemy. After school, he would enroll in the Wicker School of Art in Detroit, where he would become a nude model for 35 cents an hour, which comes out to be about $6.15 an hour in 2023, due to inflation. He would marry a Russian woman who attended the art school by the name of Sophie Gurvovich, and would parent a daughter together in 1933. In 1930, Shaver would join the communist group known as the John Reed Club, where he was portrayed in the Detroit Times newspaper as a speaker during one of their rallies. Times became very hard for Richard when the Depression hit and ended up working for a factory that built Fords in Michigan as a welder for 10 cents an hour. On August 17, 1934, Richard was admitted to the Ypsilanti State Hospital after he began explaining that he was hearing voices that were discussing the realm of the underworld while he worked. Before he was admitted, he became extremely paranoid about being followed. By what? Well, he never really explained who, but he believed that whoever it was wanted to hurt him for their belief that he was a communist, which he was, and a homosexual, which he claims that he was not. During interviews later in life, Shaver explains that he was admitted to for psych evaluations after suffering a stroke while he was at work, which made it hard for him to speak. He claimed that he was only in the hospital for 2 weeks, but author Jim Probst's research that was documented in his book Shaver, The Early Years, stated that paperwork proved that he was admitted for longer than 2 weeks. No paperwork exists about when he was released, but there are evaluation sheets dated for weeks after the 2 weeks that Shaver had claimed. The infamous Shaver letters began in 1936 when Richard wrote to Science World magazine in response to an article by Albert F. Yeager, which highlighted a possible origin of the alphabet. He claimed that 6 of our modern letters not only stood as just letters, but also as concepts. Shaver wrote, agreeing with Yeager, and claimed that he could go further back than that and began to describe his knowledge of the original Earth language that he referred to as Montong, in which he also claimed was solid proof of the historical existence of the lost civilization of Atlantis. Side note, this is the true beginning of the now famous Shaver mystery. In December 1943, Ray Palmer published both the letters and the attached outline of the so-called Montong alphabet. The response from the readers was incredible. Many people from across the country claimed that everything that Shaver had pointed out was spot on and worked on in every application that it was applied to. What exactly this means, I do not know particularly, and was unable to get clarification on this particular point. But after the incredible feedback from the readers, Palmer reached out to Shaver via a handwritten letter requesting more information about his alphabet. Shaver happily obliged with a 10,000-word article which went into great detail about his experience with the world of Lemuria, the Deros, Teros, mind control rays, space travel, and incredible beings. With response in hand, Palmer made major edits to the work and ended up publishing the once 10,000-word piece as a 31,000-word article. This new, exaggerated version of the Shaver experience, soon to be famously known as the Shaver Mystery, was labeled as a true story and almost instantly became a national sensation, with many people coming forward with their own encounters with the evil Deros. People were claiming that they had once fallen victim to their own mind control ray, or their neighbor was an actual Deros themselves, or asked questions about certain events and if they were related to the Deros in any way. So, the Shaver mystery, way out of left field when it comes to anything else, but a true coverage of the concept of Hollow Earth would not be complete without including the Shaver mystery.
I like
oh,
go ahead.
I was going to go on a whole rant, so.
All right. Well, I like the people at the end where it's not until someone says something and then they're like, "Oh yes, I've had my own experiences too," trying to get their 15 minutes of fame.
Right. Love that shit.
Yeah, I think Lemuria is a cool concept. It's the same as Atlantis, right? Like all the stories go together. But there's I think that it's the same concept that I was kind of saying earlier, right? It's hard for people to articulate some of the concepts, especially if you're talking about like an advanced civilization that's on a different path than we're on, right? So if you're thinking about Atlantis or Lemuria or Agartha or any of these like super advanced Earth civilizations that went in a different way, like you can't even conceptualize it, let alone like use our language to relay the information. So when you listen to these accounts, right, sometimes it sounds stupid, it sounds crazy, but I think that that's because these people just didn't know how to say this stuff, especially if it's in like the late 1800s. Like you don't even know how to explain some shit, you know? I can explain invisible waves that carry information to you because I can explain Wi-Fi, right? Like there's no way for them to explain that in 1800 to the next guy, right? But you know, Indonesia, you know, we talked about like the Younger Dryas, right? I did the whole Younger Dryas thing on it. And we know that the sea levels were like 400 feet lower a few thousand years ago, which means that the coastlines were way further out. There's a lot more inhabitable land, right?
Mm-hmm.
And most civilizations are on coastlines. So when those sea levels rose at the end of the Younger Dryas, a lot of those cities and shit were all just wiped away, right? They were just
Right.
submerged underwater quickly too. Look at like Indonesia, right? Like Graham Hancock put out that show on Netflix recently, that Ancient Apocalypse show. And he goes to Indonesia, and at the top of these mountains in Indonesia is like these megalithic ruins, and they're like, what the fuck is this? Right? There you go, America before, right?
Mhm.
Graham Hancock. Yeah, but he's talking about Gunung Padang, right, in Indonesia, where they have this thing. All those islands in Indonesia used to be one landmass when the sea levels were lower. And if you look at where people think Lemuria was, they think it was in the Pacific Ocean somewhere, right? This massive landmass that was submerged. So I think that Indonesia might be what people think is Lemuria. And if people start looking there underwater, they'll probably find remnants of like pyramid civilizations and stuff like that down in underwater in Indonesia.
I don't know anything about that, man.
Fair enough.
But hence why I have the book.
Yeah, well, get reading. That one's about America, though. That one's not going to get in. Well, I don't know if that one gets into. I haven't read that, but
Well, I was just looking at it real quick while you were talking it. I mean, it has stuff on like the Nazca lines and Stonehenge, and
right. And I'm sure he references stuff around the world. That's Graham Hancock's whole spiel, you know. But like, yeah, Gunung Padang, or however you pronounce that, in Indonesia, it just makes me think about all this stuff, right? Like these Hollow Earth civilizations, this concept of like advanced civilizations, whether it be living under the earth or on like some island that got wiped away, Atlantis or Lemuria or whatever the hell it is. But like, to me, that's just an awesome idea. I don't know why people always think that this is real too. The only thing I can think of is there's some element of it that is real. Even if it's just the element of, hey, we know that there was like super awesome places, there was cool cities that we used to go to, and one day the waters rose and those cities are gone now. Now we just have stories of them, even if it's as simple as that.
Yeah. No.
This strikes a chord with me about his like past life thing. I hear there's a lot of people talk about their past lives. If it was true, then everyone would talk about their past lives, or most people would talk about their past lives, unless it was their first run at things. In the same way, it's like with ghosts. It's always some 18th century so-and-so that died tragically, or some horrible murder, blah, blah, blah. It's never those lunatics that hang off the sides of tall buildings without any ropes or anything to take selfies and then fall accidentally and die. They're not out there hunting those buildings and stuff. They're like, oh my gosh, I saw him climbing past my window late at night. You know, it's just like, it's never that. It's never the hipster or the guy that dropped his vape and then picked it up and got hit by a car, you know, and died. Oh, he haunts the crosswalk. Oh my gosh. You know, it's just like, it's never that. It's always, oh, the Civil War and blah, blah, all these sorts of places, right? Yeah, I don't put any weight into people that talk about their past lives, like at all, because it's not a common thing for everyone else to do.
What if I can make an argument against that? I think
Go for it.
So like, because like Edgar Casey, right? He would do a lot of these previous life recalls for people, mostly in Atlantis, right? They claim that they were Atlanteans, and he was. Well, he claimed to be Christian. Or we had this debate before.
Yeah,
right? You claimed that he wasn't, because if he was doing these things, then how could he be? And I was like, I get that, but
unless it was
just
well, the thing that turned me was that it was apparently it wasn't on purpose, that it was just happening. Right. Yeah.
Right. So I think my argument would be that I think that they, right, big capital they, know that these things happen and these things are real, and that there is connections in our minds that we can make, right? Like you could have these epiphanies or whatever you want to call it about your past lives and shit. And people have had that forever. And I think that once technology and advancements have started getting to a point, maybe 100 years ago or so, they started putting programs in place, right, to numb that experience down for the population, right? They don't want us tuning into that kind of thing. So they feed us the GMOs and they tweak the DNA and they give us the shit that really limits our ability to get in tune with those frequencies where we can have those experiences, whether it's past life memories or like looking into the Akashic records of the future or having spiritual, experiences with your God or whatever the case might be. Like they're doing everything they can to limit those experiences for us. And they have been for the last 150 years, I think.
I don't, but that's talking about like the Western world. There's everyone else that are just like, no.
Yeah, but the Western world, like, okay, the American Empire, like, we're everywhere. We have literally stuck our nose in everything, and
Sure.
we've tampered with
Yeah, but
everything.
that doesn't mean that we control everything.
That's true, but there's places in the world where they still have these, like there's places in the world that haven't adopted Western culture or Western civilization or technology or our food or whatever the case might be. And
Sure.
like some of those places still claim to have these connections, right?
Through drugs.
Some of them are through shamanic practice. I'll use the word shamanic practices,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But like they've outlawed that in our society. So it's like,
Well, that goes back to the war on drugs just to fill the prisons and whatnot. But I don't know. You might be onto something, but I think that, as a Christian guy, I just see the whole world turning against Christianity, and the best way to turn against the idea of the Bible being real and that you live once, you die, and then you're judged and all that sort of stuff would be to proliferate the idea that we don't ever face judgment. Instead, we just get a new body. We just get a new body. We just get rinse and repeat until, it ends up being like a Buddhist type situation where we just become one with the universe once we've done all the things.
Both things can be true, though, I think, right? Like, it could be that on the grand scale of time in the universe, like, you might be right? Like, there might be an eternal somewhere, right, for your soul to end up. But I think on the shorter scale, there could be higher beings or higher entities that have manipulated this reality we live in to an extent to where maybe for the last 10, 20, 100,000 years, we have been stuck in a soul trap reincarnating because they've done their, call it Satan, call it whatever you want. Like they've manipulated things to trap the soul in this place rather than letting you ascend to the place you might call heaven.
So in the near-death experiences episodes that we did, the life review was a popular concept, and so was reincarnation. So not only would you have a life review, but you would also get reincarnated, and that's a very, very popular or common description of a near-death experience is both of those concepts.
But they wouldn't get reincarnated because they get brought back.
What do you mean?
You just said that they'd have a life review and then they'd be reincarnated, but they wouldn't get reincarnated because they didn't actually die. They came back.
No. So the discussion, the conversation about reincarnation happens with whoever your guide is or whatnot. Reincarnation is a common topic that's brought up in NDEs. It's not one of the 12 points that were pointed out by, gosh, I can't remember his name. But reincarnation will be something that I will touch on in an upcoming revisit to the topic.
Gosh,
It's
I hope
something.
not. I don't want to do this again. I don't want to pay bills and taxes again or get sick and get the flu and stuff. I'd rather just be dead.
It doesn't necessarily.
You have to. Yeah, I don't think you have to, man. Like I think in the simplest way I could put it would be just like I said. You have these higher realms, heaven, right, and these lower realms, what we might think of as hell. And you have these entities, these angelic and demonic entities. And I think that the demonic entities are literally doing everything they can to keep your soul from entering heaven. And that might mean making you do the things that make you reincarnate in this plane over and over and over again.
The angels and demons, I mean, the angels and the fallen angels, they're created beings. They have no say. They don't have any say. God, I was going to say God the Father, but God has all the say because he's the one who created this. He created you. He created your soul. They have zero say because they're also created beings. They don't have that sort of power and capability.
Sure, I think
It's
eternally
like,
you're right. I think that's what I was saying before. Like I think in the grand scheme of things, like eternally, I think you're right. I think that no matter what these entities try to do, eventually, right, we end up at the place that we're supposed to end up eternally. But that time is an illusion, right? Like the time scale thing is the thing that fucks
sure,
us up.
yeah.
You know,
So, in the very vaguest ways, the concept of this isn't shown up in all NDEs, but a lot of times people will have come back with this concept of basically having to go through certain events or certain um it's tough to say, issues and
More like a trial.
yeah, like you gotta so you go through your life and you go through certain scenarios, situations, events, and your soul learns from those, but yet you didn't cover everything in this life, so you have to go and do it again until your soul learns everything that it has to learn from the concept of being on the earthly realm or whatever other realm. Because I know you're not going to like this one, but the reincarnation doesn't only involve Earth. There are other realms that you can be reincarnated into. That a lot of people that suffer NDEs will discuss as well. Yeah, there's a lot more that I do eventually have to go into on the topic of NDEs.
I may
could
not
go with
believe it,
that.
but I'm here for it.
I
Yeah.
mean, I'm with that, because I'm not religious, right? But I'm spiritual in the sense that I do believe in like an all powerful entity, like what you would call God. I believe in that thing, right? And if that thing
Mhm.
is also standing above and in complete control of multi dimensions and
Sure.
multiple like cool, hey, of course, you know what I mean. So all the things that we talk about, like on the show, and like our speculations about interdimensions and all these types of things, like that doesn't, for me at least, limit the idea of God, right? Like I still think that like that could be happening, but there could be this like all the other religions, like the reincarnating and all these things, like those things could all still be like subsets of the thing, right? Like the thing still is the overarching thing, and then you have all these subsets of things that happen underneath it over time, but
Yeah.
eternally is this other thing, right?
I'm not saying that I believe in reincarnation or anything. The jury's out on that for me,
Sure.
but
But
just to
multiple things could be true at the same time is my only point on this. Like, as
right.
far as my opinion on this thing, because what we were talking about originally, brought this up was like the Edgar Casey thing, right? Like this recalling previous lives, right? And how that could be a conflict from like Jake's beliefs, right? And how that would
Sure.
immediately get tossed out. And I'm just only saying this to be like, don't immediately toss it out, because maybe there's like a loophole in there that makes it still fit, right?
Mhm.
That's all I'm saying.
You know what's funny? Not to sidetrack too hard, but the reason why I don't like recording with a video is because some of my my expressions aren't with words, because I'm just like, you guys
Yeah.
can see me kind of shrug and nod my head and be like, all right, whatever. But
That's
I
why I
have
like
to
it though.
realize that people listening like me on Spotify can't hear my reaction. So I have to be vocal about it and be like, you're out of your freaking mind. Or say like, okay, sure, or something like that, versus the non-vocal, all right, yeah, whatever, type stuff.
Yeah, I mean it's the same thing when you're listening to other shows like Joe Rogan, right? There's physical cues that they're giving each other that we're not listening to if you're not watching it on YouTube.
Sure, yeah.
So I mean,
So I'll
Well,
say
body
it, Jeff,
language.
you're crazy. I love you, but you're crazy.
Humans communicate mostly through body language,
Oh, yeah.
anyways,
Oh,
right?
yeah,
So
for sure.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's it, guys. That's part 2 of Hollow Earth.
Where was the legends, lore, and mythology besides this first couple paragraphs? What the heck, dude?
I mean, we dived back into it a little bit more because I had to split that into the life fort section. So on part 4, when we cover life, we'll dive a little bit more into lore and everything because it has to deal with civilizations, and I wanted to leave civilizations as part of the life episode.
Okay, cool. I was just
So
like bunch of mumbo jumbo from these guys that are like paranoid
yeah,
schizophrenics and stuff. And I'm like, okay, well, where's the mythology?
well, that's why the title of this one was Legend, Lore, and Belief. I want to say we kind of delved more into the legend side of it in a vague way. We dove into belief a little bit when we came into the Cult of Koresh, and we touched very very minutely in the beginning on lore when we talked about the different concepts that each civilization
Right.
had of an underworld. So this is the shortest segment that we have on Hollow Earth. Next week we'll dive into Hollow Earth Part 3. Actually, we won't be recording next week. Hollow Earth. We'll be doing something else, UFO days, but the people
I was
listening.
just about to ask, like, wait a second, how are we gonna do this with Jeff?
Get on
your phone, Jeff.
we could figure
Terrible
it out too.
audio.
But Hollow Earth 3 will be coming next, and we'll dive into exploration. We dive into, believe it or not, we dive into Admiral Byrd. That's probably the biggest topic, or the most popular topic when it comes to Hollow Earth, or the concept of Hollow Earth. And we talked a little bit about other explorers. I know we dive into Bunger's Oasis and some of the followers that came after Admiral Byrd. But the majority of it will be about Admiral Byrd. I want to say the first two segments are about Admiral Byrd, and it takes up about 75% of the whole presentation.
Cool.
So get ready to fall asleep there. And then the week after that, we'll be celebrating 4 years of the Infinite Rabbit Hole with Part 4 when we talk about life.
That's cool.
And life and flying saucers.
Nice.
Anything you guys want to get off your chests before we get?
Nah, it's past my bedtime, dude.
Me too.
Yeah, I got some
man.
Minecraft to play.
I gotta go to work tomorrow. But all right, guys. Well, that has been another live episode of the Infinite Rabbit Hole podcast. Until next time, travelers, we'll see you right here in the next fork in the path of the Infinite Rabbit Hole. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.